July 5th, 1943, 4:30 a.m. The Kursk salient, southern face, near Prokhorovka. The earth shakes before the sun rises, not from thunder, from steel. You can hear it before you see it, the deep, rolling growl of engines echoing across the steppe, hundreds of them vibrating through the damp soil. Inside a T-34's turret, the sound is overwhelming. Metal hums, bolts rattle, the smell of oil, sweat, and cordite hangs thick in the cramped air. Lieutenant Alexei Morozov, 22 years old, grips the edge of the turret ring as his tank lurches forward. His crew has been awake all night, boots muddy, eyes red, nerves tight. The radio crackles with clipped voices, orders coming fast, overlapping, urgent. This is it. For months, everyone has known it's coming. The Germans are attacking. Outside, dawn breaks in pale gray layers, revealing a vast, open plain scarred by trenches, tank traps, and anti-tank guns camouflaged beneath netting. Smoke already rises on the horizon. Somewhere ahead, German artillery is firing blind, softening the Soviet lines. Inside Morozov's head, there is no fear yet, only certainty, because he's inside a T-34, the tank that saved Moscow, the tank that broke the Germans at Stalingrad, the tank every Red Army tanker believes is unstoppable. Its sloped armor has shrugged off shells that should have killed them. Its wide tracks have carried them through mud where German tanks bogged down helplessly. Its 76mm gun has burned through Panzer III and IV armor again and again. They've been told this tank is more than a weapon. It's a promise. "They can't stop us," the driver shouts over the engine noise. No one disagrees. Ahead, the first flashes appear, brief white blooms on the distant ridge. German guns. The T-34s fan out into attack formation, engines roaring louder now, the ground trembling beneath dozens of advancing Soviet tanks. Morozov peers through his periscope. He expects to see the familiar shapes of German mediums. Instead, he sees something taller, something heavier, something wrong. Long barrels, boxy silhouettes, thick frontal armor catching the early light. New tanks, the gunner mutters. No one says the names yet. They don't need to. The first shell hits. Not Morozov's tank, one to the left. The impact is sharp, violent, unnatural. A flash, a deafening crack. The T-34 erupts in flame, its turret snapping sideways as if kicked by a giant's boot. The crew never gets out. Inside Morozov's tank, silence slams down harder than the explosion. That wasn't normal. German Panzer IVs don't do that. Another hit, then another. 3 T-34s burn in less than 10 seconds. The radio explodes with shouting. "Armor penetration! Enemy heavy tanks front! Distance, 2 kilometers!" 2 kilometers. That's impossible. The T-34's armor is supposed to protect them at this range. Everyone knows that. They've trained for this, lived by it. Morozov orders his gunner to fire. The gun thunders. The shell streaks out and slams into the front of the nearest German tank. It sparks and bounces. The shell ricochets away like a thrown stone. For the first time that morning, fear arrives. The German tank doesn't flinch. It rotates its turret with terrifying calm. The barrel aligns. Morozov opens his mouth to shout. The impact throws him against the turret wall. Steel screams. The interior fills with choking smoke. The tank isn't destroyed, but it's wounded. Optics shattered, radio dead, armor cracked. Outside, the battlefield has transformed. This isn't a breakthrough. It's a slaughter. German panzers and tigers positioned in depth fire methodically from prepared lines. Their optics are clear, their guns precise. Every shot counts. Soviet tanks burn across the steppe, black smoke rising straight into the morning sky like signal flares of disbelief. This was not how it was supposed to go. For 2 years, Soviet tankers have believed one simple truth, that the T-34 gave them an edge no German innovation could ever erase. But here, at Kursk, that belief is colliding head-on with reality, and reality is winning. Morozov realizes it in a single, terrible moment. The T-34 is no longer enough. And the Germans know it. As more enemy tanks emerge from the smoke, bigger, better armed, killing at distances the Soviets can barely reach, the confidence that carried the Red Army this far begins to fracture. Not everywhere, not yet, but enough. And once that crack appears, it spreads fast. Because the Battle of Kursk is only beginning, and what the Soviet tanker crews are about to face will force them to relearn everything they thought they knew about armored war. Morozov's tank limps backward, engine screaming as the driver forces it into reverse. Smoke leaks through seams that were never meant to breathe. The radio is dead. Orders no longer exist, only instinct. Across the steppe, the Red Army's attack unravels. T-34s were built to move forward, to overwhelm, to close distance. That doctrine has worked before, at Moscow, at Stalingrad. Speed and aggression solved everything. But now, speed only brings them into range faster. German fire is disciplined, cold, calculated. The Panthers sit hull down behind low rises, exposing only their sloped frontal armor. Their long 75mm guns punch through Soviet steel from distances the T-34 crews were never trained to fear. Tigers anchor the line farther back, their massive 88s engaging anything that breaks through. This is not a duel. It is a firing range. Soviet tank after Soviet tank surges forward, firing on the move. Some shots strike side armor and burn. Most do not. Shells shatter tracks, jam turrets, rip through engine compartments. Crews bail out into waist-high grass, running as ammunition cooks off behind them. Morozov watches one Panther absorb hit after hit. Nothing. "Aim for the sides! Get closer!" someone shouts over an open radio channel before it dissolves into static. Closer means death. The Soviet formations compress, tanks bunching together as they try to find cover that doesn't exist. Kursk is open land, perfect for defense, terrible for assault. The Germans knew this. They chose the ground carefully. Above, Stuka dive bombers scream down in steep arcs, sirens howling. Bombs burst between advancing tanks, flipping lighter vehicles, showering crews with dirt and fragments. The air fills with dust so thick it turns morning into twilight. Morozov's gunner finally speaks. "Comrade Lieutenant, we can't penetrate them." It's not defeat in his voice, it's confusion, because no one prepared them for this. For months, Soviet intelligence warned of a German offensive. Everyone expected it. Trenches were dug, mines laid, anti-tank guns hidden, entire belts of defense built in depth. But in the tank schools, the belief remained unchanged. The T-34 would carry the day once the counterattack began. Now that belief is burning on the steppe. At higher command levels, the reports flood in. Marshal Georgy Zhukov receives them within hours. Losses heavier than expected, enemy armor stronger than predicted, new German tanks performing exactly as feared. This is Operation Citadel, Hitler's last great offensive in the East. The Germans have thrown everything into it, new machines, veteran crews, months of preparation. And for the first time since 1941, they have a technical edge. Soviet commanders face a brutal truth. Mass alone is no longer enough. Inside his damaged tank, Morozov listens as footsteps run past, other crews abandoning disabled vehicles. Somewhere nearby, a T-34 burns fiercely, its ammunition detonating one round at a time. Each explosion feels closer than the last. The driver looks up. Orders? Morozov hesitates. He has none. The doctrine drilled into him, advance, close, overwhelm, has failed in front of his eyes. Charging again means feeding more crews into German guns. Retreat risks collapse. Then the radio crackles back to life, faint but readable. A new voice. "All units, disengage. Fall back to second defensive line. Artillery will engage. Repeat, fall back." Relief and shame collide. They reverse again, crawling through wreckage and smoke, passing knocked-out tanks they recognize, familiar turret numbers, crews they shared cigarettes with the night before. This is not defeat, but it feels like something worse. A lesson. Behind the lines, Soviet artillery begins to speak. Thousands of guns open fire in rolling waves, saturating the German positions. The earth trembles. Smoke thickens. The Panthers and Tigers disappear behind curtains of dust. For a moment, it feels like control is returning. But Morozov understands something now that he didn't at dawn. The war has changed. The T-34 is still good, still fast, still deadly, but it is no longer invincible. That realization spreads quickly among the survivors, in hushed voices, in sideways glances at burning hulls, in the way tankers stop smiling when they talk about German armor. At Kursk, the Red Army is not just fighting the enemy, it is fighting its own assumptions. And the most dangerous moment in any war is not when you are weak, it is when you discover you are not as strong as you believed. As the first day grinds on and the losses are counted, Soviet command begins making decisions that will shape the rest of the war. Decisions born not from confidence, but from hard-earned humility. And those decisions will soon send Morozov and thousands like him back into battle, this time with a very different mindset. Because the next phase of Kursk will not be about belief, it will be about adaptation. By the afternoon of July 5th, the Kursk sky has darkened, not with clouds, but with smoke. Morozov's tank sits behind the second defensive line, engine off, crew slumped in silence. The metal hull ticks as it cools, every sound too loud in the pause after chaos. Around them, mechanics crawl over damaged vehicles, hammering, welding, patching armor with whatever steel they can find. No speeches, no slogans, just work. A political officer moves down the line, quieter than usual. He doesn't repeat old phrases about invincibility. He doesn't need to. Everyone has seen the truth with their own eyes. Nearby, a staff car pulls up. Senior officers gather around a folded map laid across the hood. Voices are low, urgent. Fingers trace new lines, arrows erased, redrawn, shortened. This is where the war changes. Not in Berlin, not in Moscow, here, in the dust. At headquarters, Zhukov and Marshal Alexander Vasilevsky issue revised orders. Tank units will no longer charge blindly into prepared German armor. The T-34 will fight differently now, supported closely by infantry, artillery, and anti-tank guns. Engagements will happen at closer ranges, from concealment, from ambush. Speed is no longer the answer. Coordination is. Morozov receives the new instructions just before dusk. You will advance only under artillery cover. Infantry will screen your flanks. Do not pursue Panthers head-on. Draw them in to kill zones. Draw them in. It sounds simple. It isn't. That night, Morozov walks the line of wrecks just beyond the defensive belt. Burned-out T-34s sit half-sunk in the earth, their blackened armor still warm. Hatches hang open. Helmets lie abandoned in the grass. He stops beside one tank missing its turret entirely. A Tiger did that. He knows now. The realization settles heavy in his chest. Bravery alone won't save them anymore. Neither will faith in steel. Only thinking will. July 6th arrives with renewed violence. The Germans push again, grinding forward yard by yard. Their tanks still dominate at long range, but now the Soviets refuse to give them clean shots. Artillery fires in coordinated barrages, forcing Panthers to maneuver. Anti-tank guns, 45mm and 76mm ZIS-3s wait hidden until German armor closes. Infantry teams armed with anti-tank rifles and explosives crawl forward through shell holes. Morozov's platoon advances behind a rolling curtain of fire. The ground is cratered, uneven. Visibility is poor. Perfect. A Panther appears through the smoke, closer than before. 500 meters. 400. Hold, Morozov says. The gunner breathes slowly. 300. Fire. The shell slams into the Panther's side armor. This time, it doesn't bounce. Flames burst from the engine deck. The German tank stops dead. Cheers erupt inside the turret, but they die quickly. Another Panther fires from the flank. A T-34 explodes, flipping onto its side. There is no time to celebrate. This is how it goes now. Every gain costs blood. Every mistake is fatal. By July 7th and 8th, the battlefield becomes a graveyard of machinery. German and Soviet tanks lie tangled together, burned, broken, frozen in violent poses. The scale is staggering, hundreds of vehicles destroyed in a space small enough to walk across. The Germans are still advancing, but slower, much slower. Their crews are exhausted. Their new tanks, as powerful as they are mechanically fragile. Panthers break down. Tigers bog down. Recovery vehicles struggle under constant artillery fire. The Soviets notice and exploit it. Morozov watches a German Tiger stall while turning, its transmission screaming in protest. Soviet guns converge. Multiple hits strike its sides and rear. Eventually, the giant stops moving. It doesn't look invincible anymore. It looks trapped. This is the second realization of Kursk. German superiority exists, but it is narrow, specific, vulnerable, and the Red Army is learning fast. By mid-July, the German offensive begins to stall. Losses mount, fuel runs short, replacement crews don't arrive. The promised breakthrough never comes. On July 12th, near Prokhorovka, the war reaches its most violent expression. Tanks collide at point-blank range. Dust, smoke, and fire erase all order. It becomes a brutal, chaotic melee where long-range guns matter less than nerve and positioning. Morozov's tank survives the day, but barely. That night, as he cleans soot from his face, he realizes something that would have been unthinkable a week ago. The T-34 did not fail them. Their understanding did. And now, forged by fire and loss, that understanding is sharper than any armor. Because the Red Army is no longer fighting the war it imagined, it is fighting the war that exists. And from this point forward, the Germans will be the ones struggling to adapt. July 12, 1943, just after dawn, Prokhorovka. The fog hangs low over the fields, clinging to the ground as if it knows what's coming. Morozov's tank idles in place, engine rumbling softly, the crew silent. The order has already been given. Everyone understands it without explanation. They are about to drive straight into the storm. Ahead lies a narrow corridor hemmed in by a railway embankment on one side and a shallow ravine on the other. The terrain compresses movement, limits visibility, collapses distance. For once, the long-range advantage of German guns will mean less. This is deliberate. This is desperate. Across the field, elements of the 2nd SS Panzer Corps wait, elite formations like Leibstandarte, veterans with tigers and panthers dug in behind smoke and dust. They expect another measured Soviet push. Instead, they hear engines. Hundreds of them. The fog breaks as the first wave surges forward. T-34s appear at full speed, emerging suddenly from the mist, hulls bouncing, turrets swinging wildly. There is no careful spacing, no elegance, just mass and momentum. German gunners scramble. At this range, less than 300 meters, there is no time for calm calculations. Shots are rushed, orders overlap. The battlefield collapses into noise. Morozov's tank slams into second gear. The driver barely sees 10 meters ahead. Shapes loom and vanish. Steel passes steel at terrifying speed. A panther flashes into view on the right. Too close. The gunner fires without waiting for instruction. The shell strikes the panther's turret ring. Smoke bursts out. The German tank slews sideways, disabled. Morozov doesn't watch it burn. There's another threat ahead. At Prokhorovka, there is no front line. There is only collision. Tanks fire while moving, sometimes missing entirely, sometimes striking armor at angles no textbook ever covered. Vehicles ram each other, tracks snap, turrets jam. Crews fight blind, guided by instinct more than command. The battlefield becomes a grinding nut of machines and men. German Tigers fire point blank, their massive guns devastating when they hit, but there's no space to exploit their strength. Soviet tanks swarm, attacking from multiple directions, forcing the heavier vehicles to constantly rotate, constantly react. Morozov sees a Tiger turn too slowly. 3 T-34s converge. One is destroyed instantly. Another loses its track. The third fires into the Tiger's side at less than 50 meters. The giant stops. Smoke pours out of its hatches. For the first time since Kursk began, Morozov feels something unfamiliar. Not confidence, momentum. The fog lifts by mid-morning, revealing the full scale of the chaos. Burning wrecks litter the field. Tanks, German and Soviet, sit abandoned where crews fled or died. Smoke columns mark the ground like grim monuments. Neither side truly controls the field, but the Germans are no longer advancing. They are reacting. At SS headquarters, reports come in fragmented and alarming. Losses are heavy, progress negligible. Soviet armor keeps appearing, wave after wave, refusing to break. The German plan depended on precision. Prokhorovka has erased it. By afternoon, the fighting begins to taper off. Both sides are exhausted. Ammunition is low. Crews are deaf, shaken, burned by heat and shock. Morozov's tank rolls to a stop near the embankment, engine coughing. The crew climbs out, legs unsteady. They don't speak. They just look. The field is unrecognizable now. Grass flattened, earth churned, steel everywhere. It feels less like a battlefield and more like the wreckage of some enormous industrial accident. Later, the numbers will be debated. Who lost more tanks? Who won the day? But standing there, none of that matters. What matters is simpler. The Germans did not break through, and they never will. Because Prokhorovka marks the moment when German armor doctrine, careful, deliberate, superiority-driven, collides with a Soviet willingness to absorb punishment and adapt in real time. The T-34 did not reclaim its myth that day. Something more important replaced it. Experience. From this point forward, Soviet tank crews no longer believe in invincibility. They believe in survival. And that belief will carry them west, relentlessly. The battlefield goes quiet, slowly. Not all at once, but in fragments. A gun stops firing here, an engine dies there. The echoes fade until only the crackle of burning fuel and the distant thud of artillery remain. Morozov sits on the edge of a crater, helmet in his hands, staring across Prokhorovka. Smoke drifts low, blurring the horizon. Somewhere out there, German recovery teams are already pulling back what they can. Soviet repair crews do the same. The war does not pause for reflection, but the men do. Tank crews gather in small clusters, faces dark with soot, eyes hollow. No one counts victories. No one boasts. They exchange glances that say everything words cannot. They survived something that should have killed them. Within hours, higher command begins to assess the damage. Reports flow upward, losses severe, yes, but the German offensive has stalled completely. Operation Citadel is bleeding momentum it cannot regain. And then, quietly, decisively, Berlin makes its choice. Hitler orders the operation halted. The decision is not announced to the Red Army front lines. They feel it instead, in the sudden absence of pressure, in the way German attacks lose urgency, in the cautious withdrawals that replace aggressive probes. For the Red Army, it is a signal. The initiative has shifted. Morozov's unit is pulled back briefly for refit. Their T-34 is scarred but repairable. Fresh track links are bolted on, optics replaced, ammunition restocked. New faces arrive, replacements with stiff movements, trying not to stare at the veterans. One of them asks the question everyone once asked, "Is the T-34 really that strong?" No one answers immediately. Then Morozov speaks. Strong enough if you don't trust it blindly. That lesson is spreading across the Red Army. Training manuals are rewritten. Tank schools adjust their doctrine. Emphasis shifts towards combined arms. tanks working with infantry, artillery, engineers. The T-34 remains the backbone, but it is no longer treated as a miracle. It is treated as a tool, a very good one. As July turns into August, the Soviets begin to advance, not recklessly, methodically. German units retreat, fighting delaying actions, blowing bridges, abandoning equipment they cannot recover. Morozov drives west for the first time since Kursk began. This time, it feels different, not triumphant, inevitable. German tanks still appear, but fewer. Fuel shortages are evident, crews are tired, Panthers break down as often as they fight. Tigers are powerful, but rare, and increasingly isolated. The myth of German armored superiority erodes just as the myth of T-34 invincibility once did. Balance replaces illusion on both sides. Months later, far from Kursk, Morozov stands beside his tank again, this time in Ukraine, then Poland. The war stretches on, brutal and costly, but the pattern never reverses. The Germans defend, the Soviets advance. Kursk was not the end of the war, but it was the end of something else. The last moment when Germany believed it could regain control in the East, and the moment when Soviet tank crews stopped believing in miracles and started believing in mastery. Morozov looks at his tank, patched and repainted, its once smooth armor now a map of scars. He no longer thinks of it as indestructible. He thinks of it as honest. It will protect him if he uses it wisely. It will fail him if he doesn't. That understanding, born in fire on the Kursk steppe, will carry him all the way to the gates of Berlin. Because wars are not won by perfect machines. They are won by people who learn faster than their enemy.